Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Carol here, and this is part 2 of the little mini series for how to make this little needle case of mine. So again, Cecilia, I hope you're following this okay, and so we're on to part 2 now. So yesterday I left it that my top cover pieces were all pinned in place, and I've come back to you today with it all stitched in place and ready to go. What I did was I ran a stitch all the way around the outside to hold some of my pieces in place on my backing fabric, and then started working my way around stitching them in place. And as you can see, this is a bit wonky up here, but that's the joy of having your backing fabric larger than the piece of felt that is going to be the inside piece of your needle case. So this is what it looks like on the reverse, and if you remember, this was my piece of felt that is going to go inside. Now if you want to leave your edges raw and frayed, that's fine, you don't need to do anything else. If you, on the other hand, like I decided I was going to do, I was going to turn all my edges in so that I had what I thought would be a nicer finish, you need to turn at least one of your edges in to make a nice edge for you to work against. Now, if before you go ahead and do anything further with the cover, you need to do a little bit of prep on the inside piece of felt. So what I normally do is I normally pin one edge, position my felt where I want it to be, ready for when I do my fold-ins, like so. So I just position it nicely on my front cover, and then I pin it in place. And if I show you on this one, if I explain first, the reason we're doing that is because we need to attach the needle portion on the inside cover. Now, very quickly, the way to prepare these, if you remember, I suggested that you have at least 2, if you wanted to go for 3 of these little squares of felt. And as you know, I was being slightly different. I wanted to use up this little scrap. Now, the quickest way of finding the center of these pieces is just fold it in half and give it a good press with your iron. Now, I'm old school. When I'm sewing or doing anything with my sewing machine, it was drummed into me that you always press your seams open. So I always have my ironing board close at hand. But it is a good tip on this occasion for the simple reason that you have a crease to follow when you want to come and do your stitching. You only need to do the top one. I've actually done both there. I don't know why. Obviously got carried away. I am a bit of a ironing freak. I love ironing everything. So what I like to do is certainly put a crease in the first one, and then line them all up and just put a pin down that center portion. Now, if you're a comfortable sewer, then what you can do is just leave it pinned like that. If not, just put a tacking stitch down that center crease just to hold your pieces together. And I'll show you now how we position these on the inside piece of felt. So this was the other cover that I worked with yesterday. This was the one where I used lots and lots of individual pieces, and this was the one where I used one solid piece of fabric, this mustardy shade one, on top of my base piece, and then put other pieces on top. And actually it was so much easier to do that, and certainly when you come to sew, it made life so much easier. But you can do either way, it's entirely up to you. That's just what I found easiest. And as you can see, I've stitched this one, and I've just turned in 2 edges there. So what you need to do is you need to put your piece of felt on top of your front cover. I'm just going to move this one out of the way. Put it on top of the front cover. And what I like to do is I pin the left hand side, or the side where your pocket is going to go. And it doesn't matter, your pocket can either be on the left or it can be on the right, but whichever side your pocket is going to go on, pin it. So I pin it against the edge, and then I also pin it a couple of times, probably to about halfway along your felt. And the reason for that is because flip it over and create your pocket, or just create the crease where your pocket is going to go. Now, don't panic. Your felt will move slightly. It's like book pages when you slot them inside the signature. The inside one doesn't have as much room as the outside one, and therefore shifts over a little bit. It's exactly the same with what's going to happen with your felt here, but by pinning it, you minimize that and you stop it moving around too much. So what I've done is I pinned it, folded it over, measured my 2¼ inches, or quickly 6 centimeters that I want for my pocket. Before we move on, that can be any size. You can make it whatever you want. It doesn't have to be those measurements. These are just the measurements that I'm working to. So what I did was I made my crease and I pinned my felt in place to hold my felt inside what is going to be my pocket. And then to stop this piece of felt shifting too much, as I created that crease, I just put in 4 other pins just to hold it in place. And if I show you, this is free. So make your pocket, measure it, and then measure from the edge of your pocket 1¼ inch or 4 centimeters, and that is the place where you want to put your felt pieces, like so. So I'm going to show you very quickly on this piece of fabric, just very quickly. It doesn't have to be anything too detailed. I know roughly that my pocket is going to bring me to about there. Whoops-a-daisy. So I did that first off, flipped it over. I work in inches, I'm afraid. And yeah, look, it's gone straight away to 2¼ inch. So I know that that is how my pocket is going to be. I'm just going to put another pin along this edge to hold it nice and secure. And then, as I said, just put in another couple of pins to the other side of that crease. Now I've just put one in there, one on top and bottom, just for ease and speed here. Now that is where my pocket is going to be, and as I said, I'm just checking it because I haven't pressed it. That's 2¼ inches. Now what I did was I then took this to my ironing board and I pressed it to make sure that that crease was in place. That's when I did this one. So now I would just take that to my ironing board and press it to reinforce that crease in place. And that will give you, it's already beginning to give me a crease inside on my felt, but it's holding it nice and secure in place. So I'm not going to do that now, but what I am going to do is I'm going to measure my 1¼ inches here, just pop my felt down, and then I'm just going to eyeball where I want those pieces to be, and then I'm just pinning them in the corners through to the felt, not through to my cover, just through to the inside felt. Oops-a-daisy, can't do that now. Working at a funny angle here, so there we go. Okay, and I would put a pin in each corner, and this bit, as I say, would be loose. And by doing that, you know that you will have a good clearance here. You will also know from what I said in the previous video that you need to have clearance here at the top and at the bottom. And coming back into frame for you here on this piece of felt here, which will be your closure. So when you've done that, it will look like so. Let me just close up that pin box. It will look like so. Now, what you can do is unpin it. Obviously, this is left loose. You can unpin it and take your felt to your sewing machine and stitch. But if you're comfortable at stitching, then you can just fold that out of the way and stitch. And as you can see, I've just done a single line. Actually, I did a double straight stitch line down the center of my felt on this one, so that it looks like so. Okay, now I know that when I fold that over and fold that over like so, it's all going to fit and there's not going to be any issues. Okay, so now on to the front cover, and for that you can still leave your felt in place pinned to your front cover. And I'm just going to move on to a couple of other pieces that I've got off to one side. Oh, before I forget, somebody asked me what this Liberty fabric was, and luckily I've got the details on the selvage edge. So it's Liberty fabric, Summer House Collection, Conservatory Fruits, and I only got this last year, so I think it's still readily available, not a problem. I'm so sorry I don't have the name of this fabric, but there it is close up in case you can do an image capture and find out the name from that. But even though I have a selvage edge on here, I don't have the name of the fabric, so sorry about that. What I forgot to say to you yesterday, although I had planned to say it, and I think I referred to coming back to it later on in the video and never got round to doing it, was that you actually don't have to do this kind of arrangement where you are fabric piecing on top. You can just use a single piece of fabric, which is exactly what I've done. Sorry, I'm so off camera today. A single piece of fabric like I've done here. Now, I love this fabric so much, I decided that I wanted to do one just using this fabric. And as you can see, I haven't actually got to the stage where I've stitched this, although it is open and ready for me to stitch. What I have done though is I have turned in my edges all the way round. Now, how I do that would be, I would take this to my ironing board and I would press my edges over my felt. So that's exactly what I did here. Let me take some of these pins out. I pressed my fabric over the edge of my felt like so with the iron, and then I took it off, and you end up with a nice edge that will fit your piece of felt exactly. For doing the corners, that's exactly like you would do your corners if you were covering a journal. So all I did for those is where my crease came, so there and there, all I did was I folded across that corner and pressed it, put my finger on the point and folded it over and folded it back. So you end up with these lovely mitered corners. Okay. Now, it's not like your journals where somebody is going to see that lovely mitered corner, so don't get hung up if it doesn't work out exactly. So long as you don't have a raw edge at the corner, your little needle case is not going to fray. And in any event, we're going to stitch along the edge of the needle case. So if it is not a perfect corner and you do have a little bit of frayed fabric there, nothing's going to happen to it, because that stitching will stop it fraying back any further. And also, obviously, if you're doing the fray edged look, that's not going to be a problem either, because that's the look that you want. And again, your stitching is going to be the thing that holds the material from fraying any further. So if I open that up, I'll just show you again. All I did was where your corners meet, at that point, press it in like so, and then just fold your pieces back. Now, the joy about this project and working with felt is that it is so forgiving, makes it so easy for you to trim your felt or refold and press your fabric so that you get a perfect match if you are doing this turned in look. What you do need to do though is make sure that you have these pieces stitched on first, because once you have stitched obviously your felt to your cover, if you stitch these bits in place afterwards, you're going to end up with a line of stitching on the front. Now, that's absolutely fine. That might be a look that you want or you can live with. I don't want it on these, so I'm not going to do that. If you are using a single piece of fabric like this, what you could do is fold your pocket over and stitch all the way round. Let me just get it back in frame. So sorry about this. You could fold your pocket over and stitch all the way round your cover like so. But if you do that with your pocket in place, you're not going to have fastened this edge. So what you actually need to do is stitch all the way round with your pocket open, which means that you will have a line of stitching along this edge, and then close up your pocket and do a second line of stitching. Now you can either just do a line of stitching along your original first line of stitching so that you just capture the pocket, or you can do a second line of stitching all the way round. And if you look at this little one, you can see I actually have done a second line of stitching here around the cover. So let me open it up so that you can see maybe. Yes, there, that's clearer. I actually did a second line of stitching, and you can definitely see it inside on my felt there. And oh, and there as well. Okay, so that's that. If you are going to do some slow stitching on this, then before you attach your felt, then that is the time for you to do your slow stitching on your cover or any embroidery work that you want to do. The other thing is that, depending on your preference, you might want to connect your rope tie and your button at this stage. Now, I didn't when I made this. I actually attached my button through my felt, as you can see there, because I wanted to give it extra strength, and also nobody's going to see that tucked away inside the pocket. And similarly, I did the same thing with my thread, and I'll show you how I did both of those in the next video. But if it bothers you and you don't want it showing inside the pocket, then now is the time to put your button on the front cover before you create your pocket. So that's where I'm going to leave you today, and I will be back in part 3, having pressed my edges on this one so that I can have my felt ready to sew to the inside of my cover. On this one, obviously I'm going to be stitching that down and then stitching my felt to the inside of my cover. This one, obviously, I've got a lot to do on this one. And similarly on this one, I've got a lot to do. So I've got this to stitch first onto my felt. Then I've got my edges to turn in. And once they are beautifully turned in, like so, then I will be stitching my cover in. So I will do all of that and come back to you with part 3. And in part 3, as I say, I will be showing you how I made the cord and give you a couple of options for an easier cord than how I've made mine, and sewing in that button. And then we're almost home and dry, everybody. I think we're almost done. Okay, thank you so much for joining me again. It's been my absolute pleasure to share with you. Thank you for the lovely comments that have come my way regarding this project, and just as usual, or as always on my other videos. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a brilliant day. Take care, and see you soon.